Iowa landowners are fighting for their land and their livelihoods. They're waking up to the nightmarish reality of Agenda 2030, the globalist scheme that uses climate change as a ruse to disregard private property rights and do away with freedom altogether. In Iowa and neighboring states including Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Nebraska, a carbon capture pipeline scheme threatens to run roughshod through private property. And citizens in its path who don't want that monstrosity near their homes are finding out they may have no choice. Furthermore, thousands of acres of prime, grade A, fertile private farmland are at stake here, threatening to worsen an already grim agricultural forecast. Private companies, fueled in part by federal tax credits, your money, are working toward building underground pipelines to transport captured and pressurized carbon dioxide to specific locations where it will be buried underground. Now, don't linger too long on the conceptual absurdity of this because time's ticking, and Iowans have been receiving notices asking that they grant easements or face eminent domain if they don't play along. In response, many have packed town hall meetings to tell their elected officials to stop the pipeline. They've reached out to the Iowa Utilities Board and told board members not to grant permission for this project. Their outrage has even made headlines. But is anyone listening? I'm Paul Dragoo, and in this Freedom is the Cure episode, I'll be talking to Iowans who are organizing against the carbon capture pipeline scheme and waking up to the reality of Agenda 2030. But before we dive in, please remember to subscribe to our social media channels, like this video, and share it. And don't forget to follow our Freedom is the Cure podcast, available on most major podcast platforms. Today I'm joined by Tammy Kopsa, a regional field coordinator for the John Birch Society out of Iowa, and Todd Hochrafer, a doctor from Clear Lake, Iowa. Tammy and Todd, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So Tammy, I wanted to see if there was anything that I left out of my introduction there as far as what this carbon capture pipeline is that maybe people will help people get a better understanding.
We know who the globalists are who are trying to impact our world towards a new world government. So when I saw this carbon capture pipeline coming last year, I knew right away it was Agenda 2030, orchestrated by the United Nations. And the players behind it are trying to get rid of our private property. That's all part of it. And also do depopulation, control our food, control every aspect of our lives. And if there's a way to get rid of food production, it is to come through the rich fields of Iowa.
Can you explain what the private companies that they're going through that are, can you kind of get some details on these companies who are working on the ground there?
Yes, there's three of them so far. Navigator, which is affiliated with BlackRock, Vanguard. Larry Fink is the CEO, and he sits on the board of the World Economic Forum. Then there's Summit Industries, and that is affiliated with our former governor, Terry Branstad, but Bruce Rastetter, an Iowan, is also involved with that. And then there's Wolf, and that's with Archer Daniel Midlands. And basically what's happening is they are funded by BlackRock. Navigator has admitted that. And then the Summit Industries is probably getting information or tax money from the infrastructure bill, where the government wants to implement Agenda 2030 through this Green New Deal, which is another term for communism, as we know. But they're getting tax money, and so they're approaching these farmers, trying to convince them that they need to get rid of this pollutant, which is CO2, which it is not. And so they are trying to get easements on their land to run a pipeline through thousands of miles of Iowa farmland.
Well, let me get to Dr. Crafer here. You were one of the many who received a letter asking for, is it easement, or are they asking to buy your property? What is this letter you received, and what is it asking for, and when did you receive it?
So essentially what happened was they sent out registered mail through the post office from Summit. You had to sign it. That's their acknowledgement of receiving it. And what they were stating is that they were going to run a pipeline through your specific area of your property. And it wasn't a choice. It was pretty much, they said, this is what we're going to do. And there's the meeting about what we're going to do to your property. And so attending the meeting, which many of the community members did, and there's been several of the informational meetings. I think that was mandated by the IUB that they had to conduct these meetings in order to be given their permits that they need to do this project. And essentially we showed up with several hundred other community members in the same situation. And what essentially is what they did is they said, we're trying to do this project that's going to benefit you directly. And so their major selling point was that they were going to sell carbon-friendly ethanol to a California market, which was the first one. They said the potential for other markets, but they were going to promise a premium, which is crazy. They can't promise a premium on commodity prices. There's no way that they can do that. And so their major selling point to get the people to sign their easements were the fact that it was going to benefit you directly. And in the area, there's a lot of uses for the corn products. And one of the facts is that ethanol is one of the producers of corn usage in the area, but there's also a very large livestock contingent there as well. And so through the informational meeting, they said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to dig in your land. We're going to take 100-foot easements. And they essentially said, well, we're not going to threaten eminent domain, but eminent domain is on the table. And they kept throwing it out there. And it wasn't necessary. Yeah, it was essentially a threat. So they threatened eminent domain, and of course they had land agents right there at the meeting that they were trying to funnel you right to the land agents in order for you to sign up for their easements. And they proceeded to, after the meeting, for lack of better terms, harass. It was essentially harassment on a regular basis. That
in which way? How would they harass? Call, show up to your door?
Mail, phone call, show up at the door. I mean,
all of them, huh?
Every one of them. Yes, they have used every tactic. Multiple phone calls in one day, appearances to the house unannounced, unwelcomed. Also threats through the written word, through the mail. Many times we received packages that were actual easement contracts, and then proceeded to have to sign. FedEx was one example that if the package was sent for or rejected or whatever, then they knew right away that you were going to receive this or reject it. And within minutes, there was phone calls saying, why did you reject our proposal to you? You're not going to get a better deal. We don't want to use eminent domain, but that's a reality that we may have to do in order to make this project feasible. And the fact that, we know how to use your land better than 5 generations of farmers know how to use your land, and so we're going to take it for our own use, and we're going to put a pipeline through there if you want it or not. So they essentially used mafia tactics to say, well, if you don't want your legs broken, you better sign up with us. But if you want your legs broken, we're going to break them, and then we're going to do what we want regardless anyway.
Do you have, I guess, a significant farm plot, or it's just a piece of land that they need?
We are small, right? So this is a secondary thing for me. My primary is healthcare. My family's primary has been agriculture since day one. I'm a 5th generation to actually have the privilege to take care of this ground. 1878 is when the abstract said that we bought it from the railroad. The previous generations obviously have made their living there and their lives there. But when you look at the fact of where they're going to put it, they are going to bisect our farm. So it's not one little corner. It's not one little part. They are going to bisect it from corner to corner because it's a long stretch, and it essentially comes out to 3 acres, but you're cutting it just like a sandwich from corner to corner. And so the ramifications of that are every one of the tile systems that's in place, that have been in place for 100 years, are going to be damaged and if not destroyed. And the fact that they're going to do this technique where they essentially strip the ground 50 feet wide on either side of the pipeline placement, dig it down to whatever depth that they want to dig it, according to what they said they would negotiate with us, which is garbage. They're going to do whatever they want, and then they're going to replace the soil over the top of it. This particular farm, our particular farm, has been no-till for 25 years. And what the significance of that is that no plowshare or any sort of tillage tool beyond a field cultivator, which is essentially about a 2 to 3 inch penetration of the topsoil, has been done to this farm. So it has not been dug up except for one tile line in the last 25 years. We have been successful at being conservationists of the ground, doing the best we can to steward the ground, and doing our best to take care of the ground in a way that is responsible and respectful to the generations that was before us, and most importantly to the generations coming after us, to be stewards of the land.
Yeah.
And you're not a steward of the land if you're going to do this to the land. Like, this is not something we would choose to do. Like, this is not something we would ever sign up for and say, oh, let's put a pipeline through our ground that is very hazardous and has the potential to cause major, major damage if a rupture happens, which is, it's imminent. It's not likely, it's not going to happen. But the fact that they are going to destroy the soil profile from top to bottom. So topsoil is absolutely imperative to remain the integrity of where it's at. So we've taken years and years and years to develop the profile of the topsoil so it produces a product that is reasonable and valuable as far as commodities go.
So this would essentially scar your entire land. Would it prohibit you from, say, farming if you want to do that in the future?
So here's the problem. They say you can farm over the top of it, but if you look at the avenues that we have to farm, we're small. Like, we are a small farm in respects. There's multi-thousand acres farmers all around us, and their equipment is much bigger. Granted, our equipment isn't the smallest, but it is not the largest equipment out there. You have the weight of this equipment going across this pipeline.
And you guys are corn farmers, by the way? Corn?
Corn and soybeans. Yes,
okay.
Corn and soybeans. Yeah, and there is actually alfalfa in the field as well, just because my parents are involved with, they still have livestock that they are using the hay for. And so there is an alfalfa plot across there right where they want to cut as well. But when you look at the terms of what it will do to the ground, it's going to destroy the profile from a nutritional standpoint. It's going to destroy the profile from a drainage standpoint. And there's drainage districts in Iowa. So Iowa has this network of drainage tile that you actually are responsible for. So if you decide to put tile in your field, there is a drainage district that you're assigned and you're a part of that it drains to. So for instance, ours drains into a drainage ditch not too far away, but we're at the top of this drainage district. So if it disrupts that drainage district, it's going to affect everybody down the line. So that's going to affect our neighbors. It's going to affect everybody else. And the biggest thing that we have to think about is that once that tile is damaged, it is not repairable. Like, I don't care what they say about their ability to fix the tile. I have been around egg drainage since I was a kid. I ran a D9 cat when I was 9 years old. So the significance of that, if you look up, Google a D9 caterpillar, I was running those when I was 9 years old on a ag drainage company that my uncle had owned. And so I worked in this industry when I was a child, and being around it, repairing tile, I obviously didn't choose it for a career, but I did. You have to be a maintenance of your ground. So I've repaired tile pretty much my whole life. I've been in 7, 8, 10 foot deep holes with water up to my waist trying to repair tile. What will happen is if you do not repair this correctly, you will cause a sinkhole. So a sinkhole, the tile has suction on it. Water is it creates a vacuum in this tile, and it will pull the soil out from the top down. So the tile soil above it, right above where this fracture in the tile could occur, it will pull the soil down. And so as that pulls that soil down, it will pull everything down as long as there's something to pull. And you can have a hole as big as a pickup truck. You can have a hole as big as your leg, depending on if you catch it or not. But ultimately what it does is it takes the soil profile and sends it down the tile, and it could plug the tile down the way. So it
destroys, like you said, destroys the quality of the land. But
it destroys the quality of the land.
Summit on their website is claiming that several hundred have already signed easements and whatnot. What's the real story on the ground?
That's not accurate. Dr. Hochreifer is with the majority, I think, of farmers that are refusing this because they all understand soil science. They understand the agronomy of, how crops are how they produce their crops and the impact of this. They've seen other lines come through also. Gas, is that correct, Dr. Hochreifer?
Yeah, Dakota Access was one that has been kind of a hallmark for comparison. And the mistakes that were made with Dakota Access has left some farms rendered useless.
Yes.
Wow. So they're in the majority. I take it you've refused thus far to sell, Doctor, and they keep pressuring you?
Yeah, I won't quote what I've said because somebody will hold me to it. But yes, I take great pride in that farm. That is something that's been entrusted to me. My parents are still actively involved, but they're 80 and 78. My father has been on that farm since he was born. That's where he grew up. And there's been several life instances that have allowed him or give him the opportunity to come back to the farm and make sure he was a steward of the land, and me as well. It's something that Tammy and I have talked about. If you attack that farm, you're attacking my heritage, and you are attacking all the generations that came before me that ensured I could stand on that spot and be a steward of that farm.
So how was this? So we've known that there's quite a bit of resistance, and Dr. Hochreifer is obviously not the only one, and it sounds like it's true. People are opposed to this. What is this looking like as far as your elected officials, whether it be the commissioners or the utilities board, right? The Iowa Utilities Board, are they the ones who get to say yay or nay? What's that looking like there?
There are some issues with that. We're trying to share that information, that they are compromised, if you will. There's a conflict of interest there. Hopefully they'll do the right thing, but they do have that power to issue the permits. Mm-hmm. And we do have a lot of farmers that are contacting them. They're also contacting their county supervisors. It's my understanding that Eminent County, which is a little west of Clear Lake, but that they have said, if we don't have 90% easement agreement from the farmers in our county, we will not allow it. And that's the sort of backbone we're looking for from county supervisors.
Dr. Hochreifer, who are you approaching? How are you working to ensure this they don't try to use eminent domain and push their way on your property?
Well, one of the things that they suggested right away at the summit, I'll go back to the summit meeting. The summit meeting, there was a representative for the IUB and the OIG both at this meeting, right? And so one of the representatives for the IUB essentially was talking about procedural things.
The Utilities Board.
Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah. The IUB, Iowa Utilities Board, and the OIG would be the Office of Inspector General, that is the Attorney General's office for the state. They suggested that if you have a comment, that you can comment on the IUB's website. And so there's a process procedure that you can go through. And once you subject yourself to putting a comment on their board, it goes into official record, then they take it for consideration. At that point, you also receive all of the comments that have been posted at that point moving forward. So if you look at from the standpoint of just looking in my email box on a daily basis, there are the vast majority, and I'm not going to put numbers to it because I don't know exact numbers, but there is a vast majority of comment that have been negative and have been, there is no way in God's green earth that this should be happening, because the people who are most affected by this are rejecting this the hardest. So one of the things that I've done, obviously, have rendered comments on the IUB board, but also there's been multiple politicians that I've contacted and had several conversations with. I've contacted the governor's office, which has been falling on deaf ears. They will not comment. They will not act. They will not respond. Phone calls or emails. Senator Chuck Grassley, for instance, he has been emailed multiple times, and he has responded with form letters because there are other people that have that have written to him that I know that have gotten the exact same letter back. So he is doing a copy paste, click and send, and the governor isn't even responding. And so the local grassroots people, I have been influential in the county board of supervisors for the county that I'm in, helping them get educated on the fact of they brought questions and objections about the use of eminent domain and the fact that the pipeline is hazardous and how it's going to affect the populace of the county. So I don't actually live in the county where my farm is, but I practice in the county. But there is going to be an influence in this county as well. So I've influenced two boards, county boards, and also talked to the local politicians. Some of them have been receptive. Some of them have been politicians and used political speech and said, "Oh yes, this is an important topic for people," and then did nothing in response to that. So the problem, I would say, is it doesn't take a rocket surgeon to figure this out. All you have to do is look and follow the money, and if you follow the money and see the political influence, you can kind of see where there could be a problem. And not to point any fingers or anything like that, but all you got to do is Google it. Just Google it, and you can track all of the networking and all of the ties to each one of the people, for instance, on the IUB, the current heads of the state, and every one of the players that are involved. For the average person, you look at it and go, how is this even relatively possible that my elected officials, some of them who I voted for, I'll be honest with you, that they are ignoring this to a degree of, how could you ignore it if it wasn't just, it's just the farmers, right? Yeah. So if it's just a farmer, well, they don't have a voice. They're no big deal. I mean, even some of the people that are affected by this, they're not farmers. I am not primarily a farmer. I grew up a farm kid. I'll always be a farm kid. That is what my blood is. But when it comes to what do I put on my resume? Healthcare, farm kid, and I'll never lose them.
Yeah.
But there are farmers that their houses are going to be taken from them. Not just their farm, their way of life, their homes, everything is going to be taken from them because of the use of eminent domain. And so when it comes to this, and you argue with your local officials, if it doesn't affect them, they're not as motivated, for lack of better terms, because if there's nothing to gain, there's nothing to lose.
Tammy, let's talk about, let me get to Tammy real quick, Doctor. Tammy, let's talk about the organization here that you've been coordinating as far as how, helping people inform what this is about, but also how they can resist. I want to talk about some effective stuff. I know you had Tom DeWeese over there. He's an expert on this stuff. I saw his speech and whatnot. I want to get into some of that as far as some of those tactics. Have we begun implementing some of those? And what are some of the organization that the JBS is helping coordinate there on the ground?
What Dr. Hochrefer was talking about impacting the county supervisors of two counties, that is major significant because they have the power to stop this. Birchers are out educating their fellow citizens that this is all based on a lie. There's no such thing as man-made climate change. We need CO2. So we're doing that, we're educating. The United Nations is behind it. We are asking them to not only contact their county supervisor, we've got the language that we can spoon feed them to stop this. We're also asking people to contact their sheriff, because what we are needing is to have the sheriff understand his duty to protect us from these people. And so we're educating them with constitutional sheriff training, both of the community and the sheriff and his staff. We are also encouraging farmers, do not sign acknowledgement. Dr. Hochrefer referenced that. You didn't sign it, and within 5 minutes you had a call from them. Do not sign. Don't even sign that you acknowledged that you received that letter. Just send it back. Do not sign the easements. I am in a lot of communication with farmers just across the state. They were at the Iowa Utility Board on Monday, and they were even told, if you sign the easements, we can't help you. So don't sign the easements, and they must call their state legislator, like Dr. Hochrefer referenced. You've got to start the Iowa, and it's really the Iowa state legislature, and their state senator and the rep. that they need to help them understand we are going to stop this. You are not taking our land away. Another thing too, this is not a farmer issue. This is, we are a farm state, as is Nebraska, South Dakota, many of them are farm economies. The small town retailer, the gas station, the seed salesman, they're all going down if this happens. And that's what we're also encouraging people to do. This is going to have significant ripple effects should this be allowed to happen.
Well, not only that, I would like to add that, being Agenda 2030, if anyone who looks through their documents, they've been out there for such a long time, this is just one scheme, I would imagine, that are part of so many that are going to trample on private property rights and obviously ultimately individual freedom. Dr. Hochrefer, did you know about Agenda 2030 before this, about the Great Reset, or what this was about, or did this kind of help you begin understanding that, or do you even believe that's what this is?
Well, the way I look at politics is that I grew up in a divided household, so there was a lot of both sides of the aisle for me. One thing that really kind of put it in perspective for me when I was in college, and I'll never forget this, my uncle, who was also in healthcare, he said, "You will vote Republican for the rest of your life once you get your license." And that did not mean anything to me at the time, because I grew up in a divided household. And so, when you're a student, you tend to have a little bit more of a liberal ideal, because they're paying you to go to school. And that's how I went to school. I have student loans like everybody else does. But that's what allowed me to go to school. He said, "You will start to vote Republican when you start paying taxes." It couldn't have been more truer. And so when I look at things, I look at the fact that in politics, people are fallible, and they're quite fallible, and all you have to do is follow money. And when you look at a whole scheme of things, I'm not a climate person. I don't believe in climate change. My first thought is God's going to do what God's going to do, and it's part of the process. And there's an ebb and flow, regardless of what the arrogance of the human culture seems to think that they can do. Climate change is not something that I believe in whatsoever. I believe in being responsible and being tolerant to taking care of your environment. But when it comes to does one spray can cause greenhouse gases to cause an ozone hole? No, I don't believe that for a second. And the thing is that when you look at the opportunity to take a step back and look at the bigger picture of this, I was aware of things like this that were going on. I wasn't necessarily in the midst of it, because I have a full life the way it is. And when I go home at night, I go to bed. I can't read a lot of things at night. I'm pretty tired by the end of the day. But there's a lot of things that I look at and go, it's plausible. It's plausible. Why isn't it plausible? Anything's possible, Yeah. And so, especially when you're looking at the political environment, there's so many things that you can't agree with. Like, you just can't agree with it, and there has to be explanation. There has to be an explanation for it, and you just have to look at it from an objective standpoint. And if you look at facts instead of opinion, then you think a little bit outside of the realm of what the average person would.
Yeah. So you're waking up to something, that something else is happening besides, what's on the surface. And you're kind of saying, sure, there could be a grand scheme. How are others reacting to this, Tammy? Are others waking up to this reality, or starting to sniff the air?
Yes, I think they are. And Paul, I wish I had the latest New American magazine I was telling the doctor about the other day, War on Farmers and thank you, and food. They're out of, I did 2 speeches this week already, and they were gone. But I will say this, Dr. Hochrefer referred to this, that, we've got, I don't know if this is showing or not, I don't know how to do this, but anyway.
I see it. Unstoppable Global Warming.
Yes, by Dr. Singer. And he goes, I'm using that in my presentations. He goes through just the cycles, like Dr. referenced, of warming and cooling throughout history, as as far as was documented.
Yeah.
And we're in a warming, and probably until about 2350. And that's a good thing for humanity, because that's when we can prosper and food is plentiful in that. So
I'd imagine that'd be good for farmers up north as well, especially. We get a longer climate. I'm up here in Wisconsin. Before that, we lived in ag country in Montana. And we know for a fact, I mean, we know that it is warming. Now, to your point, Dr. Stephen Koonin, who worked under the Obama administration, he wrote a book called Unsettled. I forget the subtitle, which essentially the point was that of course, he wasn't denying that the climate was warming, but what he was saying is that the data does not support this idea that it's human cause, nor that that it's the crisis that some are saying it is. And of course, it's under that pretension that they're basically overhauling, just tearing up the economy, and of course driving so many more to poverty and whatnot. So what do people do, Tammy? I know we've kind of gone through some of that, but we always try to wrap this stuff up and try to, actually, before we get into that, let me ask you guys' opinion. Is, you've kind of already said it, but is this thing going to go through? I mean, or Iowans going to make sure one way or another it's not going through? I'll start with Dr. Hochreifer, and then we'll finish up with Tammy.
I'll say that's the $1 million question, isn't it? Or in this case, how many billions of dollars of 45Q tax credit dollars question. I would say if the people of the state prevail, it will not happen. But it just depends on the power of the dollar, and it depends on the power of the political climate. And that's what the people are fighting against. And the more I see people are getting educated on it, the more they're rejecting the ideal. And the more they're rejecting the idea that this thing needs to happen, because from the standpoint of carbon capture, I don't believe it for a second. And the fact that photosynthesis requires carbon to produce corn. So this has nothing to do with the fact of environmental stewardship. It has to do with the fact of money. And when more people understand that, then I think more people are going to stand up and say no. And the farmers can't do it alone. Like, this is something that the farmers have a small voice. They're powerful, but the small amount of people that are affected by this, the more people that are educated by it, I think if you know your tax dollars are going to fund this, then you have a different opinion than, oh, this isn't going to affect me. It's not in my backyard. It's in everybody's backyard. And that's the thing, is someone has applied for 45Q tax credits, which every single one of us that pays taxes is going to have to be responsible for paying these guys.
Yeah.
And the more people that know that, I think that's a great talking point that I've used, is that if enough people realize that, then yeah, they're going to stop it. But the sleepless nights and the worry about my heritage and the worry about my neighbor's heritage, and the fact that if this does go through, it's really going to cause a lot of damage to a lot of people. I have taken multiple trainings on the fact of dealing with the farmers and the farmers' issues that they've had. And one thing that people aren't talking about yet, but they will talk about it because they'll be forced to, is that farmers are one of the highest suicide rate occupations in the country. It's one of the, not to display the service people by any stretch of the imagination, but your average day civilian, there is a real problem with that. And especially
absolutely.
With this type of crisis. I lived through the 80s farm crisis.
Yeah.
The suicide rate then was very high. And in fact, the state of Iowa University Extension has a service in order to have farmers call in, that if they think they're suicidal, they will call in there to try to help prevent them, which the governor set aside money for, ironically.
And you're seeing this already happening, right? Landowners and farmers are clearly really stressing this out. They're about to lose their livelihoods.
I know what I've said, and I won't be quoted to saying it again. But Tammy and I have said it. But if this passes, there's going to be a loss of life. Yeah. I have no question. There'll be a loss of life unjustly, and there's no reason for it.
Yeah.
Besides greed. And so if the people know that, I still don't know. My gut tells me one thing, and then I pray a lot, and that tells me something else. So we'll see.
Yeah,
That's
probably best to
that's
listen
my
to
answer.
God, huh?
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Tammy,
You know?
Tammy, let's go to you now. Doctor mentioned sleepless nights. Now, this is way bigger, as you know, than Iowa, and it's bigger than greed. Can you, what's your take on what's going to happen in Iowa? What does this mean for everyone else who might be thinking, well, I'm not in Iowa or Nebraska or South Dakota or some of these other states, and thinking they could sleep light? What do you have to say to that, to all that?
Well, first and foremost, if this, and I believe, Doctor, this carbon capture will be stopped because of what the Iowa farmers' backbone is like. I do believe that people will rally and they will stop it. But here's the deal. This is, as you know, Paul, too, a globalist attempt to take over our private property, to destroy the wealth and the Constitution and everything that America offers to the world. And our mission statement is less government, more responsibility, and with God's help, a better world. And so what you alluded to, prayer is absolutely the foundation of the success of this battle. And we must go to the creator of the carbon dioxide and the creator of our universe and ask him to do a miraculous move here. But we also must, you know, David had to pick up the stones, right, to fling at Goliath. We need to be involved and be the boots on the ground to defend and educate our fellow man. Because if they do not succeed here, they will continue any way they can. The war on farmers clearly covered the whole globe of how these globalists are going through every other country to try to destroy the farm production, the starvation. They have a depopulation goal of what, 500 million people, and there's what, 7+ billion. Nobody wants to believe that, except now they are hearing Bill Gates and those talk about that. So what they're doing now in Indiana, they're going after nitrogen because they don't want farmers to be able to fertilize their crops. Yeah. So there's always going to be a scheme. So we must stop this, and then we cannot go home and go, phew, we won that one. We're going to go back to our lives. We've got to stay engaged and get our kids to be engaged too. Yeah. So
Tammy, give us your best last pitch. How do we get involved? Someone's watching this, you know, they're either in Iowa, they're in Wisconsin, or wherever. What do they got to do?
Just go to jbs.org and you can key in your zip code and you'll find a field coordinator. We've got incredible field coordinators across the United States. Contact them, call them, email them, say, how can I help defend our great country? What can I do? Because everything matters. And if there's ever a time where they needed just solid American boots on the ground, it's now.
Yeah.
And you know, and it doesn't mean that you have to give every moment of your time. We have millions of Americans involved. You've got 10 minutes a week. We've got to win. We've got our country reclaimed.
Thank you so much, Tammy. Thank you so much, Tammy. Thank you, Dr. Crayford. Thank you so much for taking the time. I hear your phone ringing back there. You probably need to get back to work.
Oh yeah,
there's somebody. Thank you so much, and we wish you the best. And of course, we'll be working and working with you guys and praying for you. And hopefully, we could come out of this victorious. Have a good one, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. Wonderful having you on.
Yes, it was
Absolutely.
My pleasure.
Crazy stuff, folks. That's for sure. Unfortunately, it's real. Do not sleep on this just because you're not in the path of this pipeline. This is bigger than that. This is about a worldwide agenda that, if it's not stopped, will affect everyone. There are many ways it can be implemented, and there's a good chance it's already infected your community in some way. So please visit our Agenda 2030 action page to learn more about this insidious globalist plan that threatens all our liberties. And then contact a local JBS coordinator, like Tammy said, to learn more about joining, or if you're already a JBS member, getting plugged in your local chapter so you can help create understanding and organize against Agenda 2030 in your community. Links are in the description below. And in the meantime, always remember, whatever the societal ailment, freedom is the cure.